10 things that every parent of a dyslexic child should know. As a parent of a child with dyslexia and as a professional, I believed number 9, and it breaks my heart that I believed this. So stay tuned to see what that is. Here we go. Number 1, you did not cause your child's dyslexia. Mama guilt is strong. I know it. I still deal with it. But you didn't do anything to cause your child to have dyslexia. It is something that is present at birth. It's a neurobiological disorder, which means that it's present at birth. It is something they will always have. It can be remediated, and they can be very functional in a literate world, but they will always be dyslexic. So you didn't do anything to cause it. You need to know that. Okay, number 2, dyslexia is not a visual problem. It has nothing to do with how they see the words on the page. If they're struggling with a visual problem, that is separate. But dyslexia is due to how the brain processes sounds and written language. All right, number 3, listening to books, also called ear reading, gives them the same exposure to very rich vocabulary that they would get if they were sight reading or eye reading a book. So the reason we want kids to read so much is it really enhances their vocabulary. We get so much of our vocabulary from literature, from reading. And if they're listening to a story, they're getting that same exposure to vocabulary. So ear reading to books is not cheating for kids with dyslexia. It's leveling their playing field so they get that exposure to vocabulary as well. Okay, number 4, graphic novels are a great choice. I see a lot of parents who are hesitant to let their kids read graphic novels, but there's a couple really, really great things about graphic novels for kids with dyslexia. One is they feel like they're carrying around big chapter books like their friends, okay? They don't feel like they still have to read these little tiny decodable readers and they're carrying chapter books. Number 2 is it's less overwhelming to look at those pages because there's less words on them. So they're more inclined to pick up that book and try to read it independently because they don't get overwhelmed with the pages. And number 3, graphic novels actually have a lot of low frequency words with rich vocabulary. So if you ever thumb through one of them, I encourage you to actually think about the words that they're using on the page. They're not always just little simple books. They're really good for kids with dyslexia. All right, number 5, your child with dyslexia can learn to read and spell. They just need the right type of instruction. And the type of instruction they need is called structured literacy. There are different types of structured literacy available. The most commonly known is probably Orton-Gillingham, but I will argue that that is not the best type of reading instruction, the best type of structured literacy for kids with dyslexia and structured literacy. There are many speech-to-print programs that start with the sounds in words instead of using something like Orton-Gillingham that starts with the printed system and tries to make it match sound. We can do a whole other video on that. Number 6, you have to separate instructional reading time from reading time for pleasure, okay? A lot of times parents are told, read to your child more, read to your child more, and that's great, except that we don't want them to lose their love of reading and their love of books and their love of stories. And when we take that cuddle time, right? That intimate time that we have with our kids before bedtime when we're usually reading them stories, and now we're trying to make them read, which is an activity that's difficult for them and stressful for them. It doesn't get them settled down for bedtime. It causes them anxiety, and we want them to enjoy the stories and the books and the time with the parents. So make sure when you're doing reading time, you're separating instructional time, which is when you're going to ask them to work harder to work on learning to read and spell, from reading for pleasure, which should be bedtime stories, reading a book together. They are very different activities. Number 7, your child has many strengths, not just weaknesses in learning to read and spell. Kids with dyslexia often think about things very differently. They often have very good 3D spatial thinking. They tend to love Legos. They're good at problem solving. They are really good at thinking outside of the box. So make sure that you notice and you point out and help your child recognize their strengths, not just their weaknesses. Okay, that leads us right into number 8, which is praise the effort, not their achievements. And this is going to help foster a growth mindset in kids with dyslexia to help them recognize that they're always learning, that things might be hard, but as long as we keep working and we keep putting in the effort, it will get a little bit easier. So the end goal is not always exactly the same for kids with dyslexia and kids without dyslexia, but the goal of working hard and getting a little bit better every day is. So praise their efforts, not the achievement. Number 9, reading difficulty in kids with dyslexia is absolutely not a result of low intelligence. In fact, kids with dyslexia often have average to above average intelligence. So it has nothing to do with how smart they are. They're often very bright children, and that's why when given the right kind of instruction, they learn to read. And many of them can learn to read very quickly when we teach them the right way and we give them exposure to the right kind of instruction. Okay, and this is the one that even as a professional, I didn't understand. And I'm going to tell you that it breaks my heart to think that I sat in school meetings as a related service for children who had a specific learning disability as their primary educational category in the school. And so I was a related service. And at the time I didn't understand how reading is a language-based skill and how speech pathologists should be involved more. I just didn't understand it. And there's still a lot of, it really does hurt my heart to think that there are professionals out there that still believe that. And so I always try to make it a point in a meeting to recognize how bright the child is and where their strengths are, because they are so much more than their weakness in reading and spelling. Number 10, dyslexia is more common than you think. Okay, the statistics range from 1 in 5, which is 20%, to 10% of all people have some degree of dyslexia. Some people probably are just slow readers and they were never officially diagnosed because they could function. But it's usually the kids that struggle a lot more that get that diagnosis of dyslexia. So here's a good example. My daughter is severely dyslexic, and I didn't recognize that my husband has dyslexia until she was diagnosed. And then a lot of things made sense. And I was like, oh, this is why when we were married and you were still in college, I had to rewrite your papers because your spelling was awful. Okay, I probably just dated myself because he was still writing and not just typing papers. This is why you have trouble with coordinating some sounds in words. This is why you are a very bright person, but you prefer to watch a video because you're a slow reader. So he never knew he was high-functioning dyslexic, and he wouldn't have known if our daughter wasn't severely dyslexic. But all the sound manipulation things that she struggles with, when we started working on them, he struggled with them also. So it's a lot more common than we recognize. And again, this is something that most professionals don't realize. My daughter's school, sometimes I feel like they think she's the first dyslexic kid they've met, which is, I know is not true. her teacher this year, very well intended, was telling me how she took some classes in dyslexia before the school year started because she'd never had a child with dyslexia in her class. I bet you have. You just didn't know it. Because it's as many as 1 in 5. And so if you're a teacher and you think that you have only 1, maybe 2 kids with dyslexia in your room, you're probably missing them. That's all. We've got those 10 things about dyslexia that every parent should know, and I threw in some information for teachers there at the end also, because there are many teachers who are also parents. So if you have any questions, put it in the comments below and be sure to subscribe.